I have many 40k armies, but let me introduce you to one of my favorite ones, my Mad Max Orc army. My favorite models in this army include my boys. These have all been kit bashed with Spellcrow heads and posed arms. My HQs and their bodyguards. My kit bash take on the infamous pirate Captain Badrock, flanked by some brutal orc knobs. And of course, the reason I have this army, my bikes. These are my favorite orc models, all kit bashed so that every one of them is truly unique. And now it's time to add a few more units to this army, and I am conflicted, because this new unit is not quite gonna fit, and I have to decide just how committed am I to this Mad Max Fury Road orc theme. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to EonsOfBattle, and the models I want to add to my orc army are these samurai orcs from a company called Puppetswar. More on them in a bit. They are so cool, but they're so different to what I've been doing with my orc army, and I worry that they just will not fit. Now, the typical progression of a Warhammer army is to find that faction that speaks to you the most, and then you decide on a theme. This can be something found while on Pinterest, Google, or wherever photos are found online, perusing through the artwork and paint and model section of your codex, or watching your favorite movie. But once you have found it, you stick with it, for box after box after box after box until it becomes an extension of yourself, until you become the guy with the Mad Max Orc army. And I have done that with my army. I picked out a scheme and I'm sticking with it. But darn it, I just want to paint some samurai orcs. I am a simple man, I like simple things, and katana-wielding greenskins is one of those. But alas, I don't have a ninja-inspired orc army, I have a Mad Max Fury Road-inspired orc army. So, I guess I don't get to do the cool thing, because I made a decision back in 2015 and I have to stick with it. And now, I am sad. Can any of you guys relate to this? On one hand, you have the integrity of your scheme, but on the other hand, you have a really cool idea. But rules are rules, and you can't cross the stream. Or can you? This hobby is a creative outlet, and that means overcoming artistic challenges. And just like I used my creativity to come up with this Mad Max scheme, I can now use my creativity again to figure out how to work these samurai into the theme. The 40k universe is a big one, where basically anything is possible. Gene Stealer cults on Terra, humans working with the Tau, female space marines. With enough imagination, anything is possible. I should not be looking at these samurai orcs as something untouchable, but a new hobby challenge. Now, Mad Max Fury Road is the best movie ever made, so I know everyone has seen it already, so I'll just refresh your memory. In Mad Max Fury Road, there are different factions out there in the deserts. The Bullet Farmer, who covers himself head to toe in bullets and weapons, and the People Eater, who considers himself a very dapper fella who wears old world suits. And I am sure that somewhere out there in the sandy wastelands of post-apocalyptic Australia, there are many more gangs and tribes. Perhaps if they had driven just 100 miles north, they would have come across a camp that is made up of nothing but weebs who love Japan and melee weapons. And that is how I'll incorporate these new orcs into my army. And speaking of where these orcs came from, these models were created by Puppetswar. Puppetswar.eu is a longtime seller in the miniature space. On their web store, you will find tons of finely detailed resin cast miniatures that fit perfectly into the sci-fi fantasy aesthetic. And they have just about anything you could want to fulfill your kit bashing needs, with tons of unique weapons, equipment, head accessories, and big ol' vehicles. Some of my favorites are these Bargeist Predator monsters and Nosferatu helmets, perfect for Night Lords. And now they have a Patreon, where they'll be coming out with new awesome sculpts monthly. These samurai bad boys were featured in their December release, and in the month of January, they're releasing their Prime Riders of the Norse and Powerful Orc Gunners. One of the things that sets Puppetswar apart from other sellers is their commitment to customizability and cross-compatibility within their sculpts. Head on over to Puppetswar Patreon to get on board for monthly sci fantasy modular miniatures. So, I have my models and I have my story, it's now time to paint. When I'm working on a model I've never painted before, I like to start small. I think I'm gonna paint one of these guys. That way, when I make mistakes, they will happen faster and I can correct them faster. Instead of losing an entire hour of work because I don't like the green I used on any other bodies, instead I can just prepare one. And then I can take what I learn on one and apply it to the rest of them. First things first, this orc needs a good prime job. I poured some of my favorite primer, Stynylrez Black Primer, through my airbrush and then got to work. I like a black primer because it takes care of my shadows for me. I much prefer highlighting to shading, so a black primer makes sense for me. For my base coat, I applied a dark red. This is a purpley dark red and should make a great base for my next highlights. And that highlight is a bright, bright red. I want this to be an absolutely silly bright red because the weathering I will do later, it'll be dulled down a lot. And if it was not so bright to begin with, the final product would end up too dark. I always love the look of a model once it's been primed and airbrush highlighted because it looks so clean and crispy. Now I think it's time to finish all of the armor, and then once that's done, I'll move on to the skin. The first step to nice weathered samurai armor is a generous splash of Agrax Earthshade, a brown wash. This will bring out all of the lovely details in the prints. And Agrax is my favorite brown wash because it dries quick and matte. That will make the next step much easier. I prepared some gray paint for dry brushing. I'm using my Army Painter's small dry brush, wiping away most of the paint and then swiping the bristles across the model's armor plates to give them an edge highlight. This, along with the wash, will really give these pieces a nice outline and make them look sharp. You don't want to over dry brush because if too much gray sticks to the surface of the armor, they will not look as red. And you want that red finish. Less is more, work slow with dry brushing. After that dry brushing, it was time for some bright silver paint. I took a piece of foam and tore myself a small ball and held that with tweezers. Then I picked up some silver paint and began sponging this onto the armor. This will create random large chips, and doing this before the skin, clothing, and rope will mean that I don't have to be careful. Any chips in places that there should not be chips will just get corrected later when I paint those areas. Recently, I've rediscovered my love of metallics. I really don't enjoy painting with metallics because they're just so tricky. They don't behave like a normal acrylic paint because they're not. They're kind of like a glitter paint. They don't behave like regular acrylics, and so I always found it difficult to get them to do the things I wanted them to do. But I have recently unlocked a secret, and that is to use lots of grays and regular acrylics in place of metallics, and then use metallics as just a finishing touch. I dry brushed some light gray all over this model, and then I sponged on the silver, and that kind of tricks your eye into thinking that that nice gray edge highlight is the same silver paint as the big old chips. But the chips are big enough that your eye can see the reflections in the metallics, and the metallics look good. But the metallics would not have looked good as the edge highlight on all the armor. It's kind of replicating perspective that you'd see in real life. In real life, shiny things that are right up next to your eyes look really, really shiny, but from 10 feet away, they don't look shiny. They just look like a color. And that's kind of how we have to replicate on models, because technically, even though this model is 4 inches from my eyes, in reality, I'm trying to replicate the look of something that would be 10, 15 feet away. And so using regular acrylics like grays for silver and browns and oranges for gold is super, super useful tool to getting metallics to do what I want them to do. And I'm so jazzed about metallics that I think I'm gonna put a pause on his skin because I wanna work on those thorns. I made myself a dark gray paint out of the light gray that was already on my palette, and then I spread this all over the swords. Then I took a black wash paint and spread this over the sword to capture all the little dings and scratches that were sculpted into the prints. Then I grabbed my light gray, and just like I did on the red armor, I dry brushed this over the sword to edge highlight them. And I dry brushed a lot so that more of the dark gray was covered, and the light gray over dark will appear as dings and scratches. And now that I've painted on the details I want on the sword, I gave it a sponging of bright silver so that it'll have a nice shiny glisten. Then I grabbed some black paint and a sharp bristle brush and I painted in all of the crazy nicks in the sword because I think that these are really funny and I want to make sure that they are visible. These orcs clearly don't take care of their blades. And speaking of dry brushing and battle damage, this would be a great technique to use on some terrain. And you know where you can find terrain? That's right, our Patreon. Over there we have lots of high quality terrain STLs available, and it is the best way to support us making videos. In addition to the grimdark terrain, you will also get access to some behind the scenes, voting on what models I paint live here on YouTube, a live hobby hangout every week, and more. With that said, it's time to get back to the samurai orcs. So now it's finally time for the orc skin, and for my orcs, I like to do a thing where I create a new recipe for every single orc, That way they look really, really unique, and a crowd of them looks really, really good when they all have a slightly different tinge to their skin. And so for this guy, it looks like it's gonna be base coat of P3 Worm Green, and for highlights, Vallejo Sick Green. I put some white paint on my palette and then prepared my greens. I left lots of room so that I can mix these with other colors. Because of my random selection, my light green has to become a dark green, so I mixed it with black paints. I think it's good to give yourself little challenges like this. It helps to learn your paints. And to turn my darker green into a light green, I added some white paints. Then I mixed my two colors together to get my middle color that'll blend the two colors together on the orc skin. And now it was time to paint that orc. I applied my base color. It took about 2 thin coats to cover up the Hot Rod Red base coat. Then I began with my first highlights. The muscles on this orc are very proud, and that makes them very easy to paint. I put this highlight on 90% of the skin, leaving the darker base colors only in the recesses. Now for my next highlight, I used my previous highlights as a guide and only painted this color on 50% of what I painted on the first highlights. So now there are 3 colors creating steps between the lightest greens and darkest. Finally, my last highlight, this is by far the lightest color, and I am applying a lot less of this than previous layers. I am painting this color only using small brush strokes and painting it only on the tops of the muscles. Then to add more definition and outline to the recesses, I used a little green wash. This darkened up the cracks and added more contrast, which is always a good move. That color combination makes for a really wintergreen, spearminty colored orc. Kind of fun. But the skin's done, the armor's done. This guy is pretty darn close to being finished. Just a few more details to pick out, and then it'll be time to knock out the rest of the squad. I painted the handguards of the sword with a yellow-brown, and I also used this color to paint all the ropes that hold the orc's samurai armor together. Then I watered down some black paint and used this on the cloth parts of his outfit. Then the mouth. I painted the teeth and mouth with the beige, and then I picked out the teeth with the same light gray that I've been using for all the armor. Then I picked out the teeth with white paint. Would orcs' teeth really be this well kept? Probably not, but it does look striking. And then a big old brown wash over the whole mouth. And boom, just like that, 1 orc down. And now that I have completed it, I know what I am doing, and it should be really easy to take what I have learned and apply it to the other 4. I once again gloved up and primed these new knobs. I probably could have primed them all at the same time, but you know what? I didn't think of it back then. I really liked working this way. Having already painted the one, I now have the hang of painting these fellas, and I can get right into the painting zone with the rest of the squad. I have my recipes, my order of operations, I plugged in my taste sway and went to town on them. You should never feel trapped by your color scheme. 40K is a creative outlet, and you should not let your creativity be stifled. And what is stopping you? Nothing, and that's what. Let me spin you a yarn. Let me tell you about another recent time where I thought I could not do something and then decided to do it anyway. I have a Black Templar army. It's nearly 10,000 points, and I have been working on it for years and years. And I love it, but I am really getting tired of painting black armor. Anyone would. And so when it came time to paint these Space Marine suppressors, I thought, here we go again, but I really didn't want to. And I was kind of feeling doomed to paint black armor again and again forever, so I was starting to resent my own army, and that is a recipe for burnout. But then I thought about it, and I decided that I can do whatever I wanted. I decided to go with white. And now I love these models. They are one of my favorite units, and they look so good alongside their dark armored brothers. These orcs are exactly the same. An orc is an orc. No need for them all to be identical. In fact, it's more fun when they are not. And now I have a full squad. They look sick. My orcs are painted, and it is now time to work on their bases. As you can see, my orcs are pinned to my wooden blocks instead of my normal tape, and that is because I've already decided what bases I want for them. I've decided I'm going to recreate my Road Rage Scenic Highway bases. And in a Martha Stewart moment, I already have them pre-made. I primed my Road Rage base and did some dry brushing with my dark gray and then a light gray. I used the same colors that were already on my palette from my orcs. Then to create my road lines, I masked them up using some painter's tape. These are going to be what really sells these little discs of cork as holes punched out of a well-worn desert road. I stippled on some yellow paint mixed with gap filler to give it a more texture than your average acrylic paints. And then the best part of any project, demasking. Always super fun, and these turned out great. It's a good idea to do this when the paint is still wet, so it doesn't want to chip or peel. I threw an earth brown into my airbrush and blasted my bases. These are Mad Max roads. They need to be apocalyptically dusty and destroyed. I did a final dry brushing with some tan paint to bring out some of the details of my cork and sand. And then it was time to attach my knobs, my ninja knobs. I figured out where I wanted my orcs to stand and then drilled a hole the same diameter as my paperclip, and then attached my orcs with superglue. It is looking snazzy, but he's not done yet. I pressed some yellow pigment powders into the base, and this is going to give me that golden sand of Mad Max Fury Road. This was looking good and dry, but it covered up my road surface just a little too much, so I wiped away a bit of it with a damp brush. Thanks again to Puppetswar for sponsoring this video and putting these lovely orcs into my hands. Now let's take a look at how they turned out. I'm glad I decided to let myself branch out. It was definitely worth it. Not only did I get to experience something new with painting, but my orc army looks better for it. The Mad Max world isn't just about dust and car parts, but it is about the weird and wacky characters who survive in the harsh deserts of the not-so-distant future. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and that is exactly how the orcs like it.